Sitting in.
All right, we'll call a regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. If you could join me, I'm going to ask, we have an Eagle Scout in the house. I'm going to ask Christopher to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was easy, right? All right.
I move to appoint Mr. Trescott as acting secretary for this evening.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, Angelina Barnes. Here. Dwight Ginsbeck.
Here.
Jason Hanselman.
Here.
Brad Stoddard. John Tramontana.
Here.
Lisa Trescott, I am here. Brad Weaver.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Do you have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Our next item is a special recognition tonight. I've already kind of spoiled it a little bit with Christopher, but it's really great. I have a whole two-page document here. I'm not going to read all of it, but Christopher's a third-generation Eagle Scout, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. I'll talk a little bit about what his accomplishment was or what his project was. It was Police and Thank You, and his efforts helped bring 50 blankets to children area hospitals. So, would you mind coming up? We're gonna give you a little presentation. I'd love to hear 30 seconds if you could just tell us about your experience.
Like my experience with my project.
Yeah.
So I made 50 tie blankets through a company called Police and Thank You, who they send you the materials, and then you and the group of people or what have you will make the blankets and then send the blankets to them, and they'll clean them and all that and send those blankets to different hospitals. And what's cool about it is that you can put a little code on the blanket. Through their website, you can post a video, so that way they know like who made the blanket and all that. So
That's great. Well, congratulations. We're going to come around and want to get a picture and have a little reward for you here. That's all right?
Oh, everybody, also.
So you want to turn around here in the middle, and they'll stand on each side of you.
So this just says, to Christopher McNeely, a member of Boy Scout Troop 77, the Board of Education and Administration of DeWitt Public Schools. Take great pride in congratulating you on your accomplishment. You're commended for your outstanding achievement. So congratulations. Good. Thank you very much. And other kids too.
Sorry.
How it
All right, Jennifer Branch, FCC Recent.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. And shortly we'll get to probably the more important part of me being up here, which is having a couple of students to speak a little bit to their experience in our career technical education programs. My name is Jennifer Branch, and I am the Career Education Director at Clinton County RESA. And I just would like to point out that I am also joined here by my boss, Dr. Wayne Petroia at Clinton County RESA, who is our superintendent. So glad he could join me this evening. Who's served a good long career in public education, just so you know. Definitely been a great mentor to me. I have some general updates, and I believe in your board packet you have some data and some numbers in terms of enrollments and college credits that students have the opportunity to earn and what that saves them. All of our programs have the opportunity for students to earn either direct or articulated or credit by exam college credit. And a few of our programs even have attached to them an early college option, which means that they can take our programs in the 11th grade year, then their senior year, they're about half at their home school and half at the post-secondary institution, and then they actually delay officially receiving their diploma. Even though they can walk across the stage and have an open house and all of those things, they have what's essentially a 13th year of high school, which is entirely college classes. And then they oftentimes can earn an associate's degree or an additional post-secondary credential through our program. So we're growing and we're excited about that. We have a few new staff this year. We brought on board a new welding instructor. That program is housed at DeWitt. It's direct college credit with Mid-Michigan College. Justin Vanport is a St. John's High School graduate and was in Matt Billings' medals in welding classes when he was in high school. So, and then spent many years in the industry. Before snagging him, he was a bridge welder for the Michigan Department of Transportation, one of 4 in the state. So they were not too happy to lose him, but we were happy to gain him. So Matt Spees is, thank you. Matt Spees is our sports medicine instructor. Spent 16 years as an athletic trainer for St. John's Public Schools, and also, ironically, on the side, has a car repair business. So we'll figure. Jennifer Strickland, a St. John's High School graduate, graduated actually with me many years ago, and it had taught many years at Lanesburg in English and Language Arts, and has her master's and doctorate studies have been in curriculum and instruction. So she's doing a great job for us. And then right here at DeWitt, our RISA program, Business Management Entrepreneurship, Leslie Lothman, on Kelly Williams' retirement, is teaching that program, so you can see some of our new staff there. We do several things throughout our career education department aside from strictly our countywide CTE programs. One of them, every year we have an annual McCrayo College Night. We have over 40 post-secondary institutions and post-secondary options represented. In the fall, we honor the statewide, there's a manufacturing day, and our students from many of our programs that are in the manufacturing pathway had the opportunity to visit some of those businesses you see there. And then we had our annual, we're so excited about this, and thank you to DeWitt for housing us, our annual Career Expo, where all 8th and 10th graders in the whole county had an opportunity to come visit representation from high school CTE, post-secondary, and then business and industry. The weather was great, it was a great day, and I know the students had a lot of fun. You can see some students there putting together kind of an anatomy and physiology puzzle. So we asked our expo exhibitors to make sure they're doing things to engage student interests, and they do a good job. These are just some of the work-based learning placements in our programs that happen every year. It's a long list for education and early childhood, so I didn't include it on this slide. I know some of those students actually are placed in some of our buildings here in DeWitt, in some of our elementary schools. And so students get an opportunity, as you can see, to put to good use the skills that they're learning in class, which is one of the things that separates career and technical education from other options that a student might have in their schedule. And Ashley was talking with a parent here right before the meeting about her daughter who graduated last year and has an internship, the only non-college student at the time that was offered an internship with Spicer Group after taking our CAD and design technology. So definitely making some industry connections, and the students will talk a little more about kind of putting their skills to use. Leslie Lothman also supervises some CTE-related work-based learning. So these may be students who aren't directly in a CTE program, but maybe have taken a CTE class or a related class, or their educational development plan warrants a work-based learning placement. And these are some of the business and industry locations that those students are placed based on their educational development plans. Another new opportunity this year, and I really have to give a lot of thanks to Kelly Williams and my predecessor, Pat Jackson, who we work with to plan these types of events. We have lunch and learns. Whenever a business and industry would like, we try to gather students based on their EDP data. We work with their high school counselors and high school principals, and they reach out to students, and the industry experts come in, and students can join either in person or virtually, and speak to those industry experts about their pathway, things like summer jobs, apprenticeships, future careers, and talk directly with them. So this is new this year. All students in Clinton County, either through work that we do at CC RISA in conjunction with local districts, or some local districts have this down to such a fine art that they don't really need much help from us. We do gather volunteers for our senior interview days, and so every senior that graduates from one of the high schools in Clinton County has an opportunity to practice interviewing skills with someone from business and industry. And then I mentioned the Capital Region Technical Early College, 3 of our programs, allied health, cybersecurity. Could not get any new students in there this year because LCC was unable to locate an instructor, and then education early childhood offered that early college. To show you a little data here, I wish Jennifer Fenning were here with me. She's our early college coordinator to give you the real, ins and outs and in the trenches information about this data, but it's pretty self-explanatory. This shows over the course of each of the years by program how many new students came on board each year and where we're at now total. So this year we have 27 students, 20 of them in allied health, 4 in cybersecurity, and those would be ones that were already in the program, and 3 in education early childhood. And then you can see by district and how that's kind of gone up and down over the years. By grade level, how many students are in each of the different grades. So this year we will have 11 students that will complete their early college experience, so it has definitely grown. And this is the most impressive slide, the number of college credits that these students have earned being part of the Capital Region Technical Early College. So you can think about how much a college credit costs, and you can see that that's definitely saving these students and their families quite a bit of money. But now the most important part, I'd like to call up Merritt Gus in our Emergency Services Fire Science program, and Lucas Perez in our Business Management and Entrepreneurship program. So gentlemen, if you could come up and join me. I did give them a question ahead of time because I didn't, didn't want to put them too much on the spot. So yeah, they, I wanted them to be prepared. Forgive me because I have to pull it up on my phone. You probably have memorized, I'm sure. All right. So, and I'm going to direct this question if you both take a moment to answer it. So, what made you decide to take a Clinton County Reset Career Connections program?
I was looking for like a different opportunity, and I happened to come across fire science and was looking at the field that I wanted to do. Decided to do it.
Well, I wanted to learn more about what it was like to be an entrepreneur and how to start a business. I knew that DeWitt had a cafe and a screen printing business in the high school, so I thought it was a good opportunity for me to learn more.
What's been the best part of being in the CC Career Connections program so far?
We get to do a lot of hands-on stuff with our fires. We get to do a lot of scenarios. This past week we get to go on oxygen and crawl around and so we get rescue dummies that we can pull out and stuff for doing fire scenarios. And probably the best part was we got to go 3 weeks ago. We got to go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, to compete in nationals for fire science.
You did pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Say a little bit about
We
that.
won, as a class, we won 8 awards. I was a part of 2 of them where we came in 3rd place, and it's a rapid rescue intervention drills is what I came in 3rd place for, and then as a group we won 8 total awards.
Great, best part so far.
Just like he mentioned, there's a lot of hands-on experience. At the DeWitt Cafe, there's a cafe, obviously, the screen printing business. So I manage the heat press a lot, so I do orders for people that want t-shirts and mugs and all these types of designs. So my favorite part is being able to manage that and then create designs for the customers.
All right, and what opportunities do you think this has opened up for you that you might not have otherwise had?
It's opened me a lot of the different opportunities that we get a lot of certifications. Like we get the MFR on my uniform, it's medical first responders license that we're going to be getting ready to get, and that we start this week, and it goes for a couple months, and then we'll get it's a national license. So once we'll take the test, and then if you pass once you turn 18, you get it for the state of Michigan.
So one thing that is really useful for this course is that a lot of stuff I learned in school with the accounting and the marketing, I can apply that to a real life business in this class. So I think that helps me better prepare me for the future.
And how do you think that it better prepares you for your plans after high school?
It's opened me a lot to things I can do with the license that we can get. I can go and I could join like the DeWitt area fire department, and then they could pay for my other like if I wanted to do fire 1 and fire 2, and they'll pay for those licenses that I could get if I wanted to become a firefighter.
I'll be attending Michigan State University next fall, and I'll be going to the business finance area. So, like I mentioned before, I'll be able to, in the class, I'll be able to connect it to a real life scenario that I was in this class.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for me?
I have one. The screen printing business, do you guys serve the public or just internally school conference?
Well, we have a website, so if you put in a order for whatever you want, then we can make it. So it's not just school.
Anthropos Cafe, correct? Well, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just looking at the data, so it looks like St. John's has a lot of representation in terms of the years of students being engaged in the program. Do you think it's largely because of where some of the classes are located? And it's like,
I do think that location plays a part in it, because it is centrally located, that we have a lot of our classes in St. John's. More and more, we're seeing, you know, in some cases, districts will run a van out to St. John's in the morning, and we are looking at, even for next year, I've already got a survey out to council, a couple of classes, in terms of placement, you know, can we house it here, can we house it here, that kind of thing. But I do think, you know, the tough part for us is always with the location is whenever you move a program, it might help some students, and then the other students can't take it because you've moved it to another location. So definitely, I think that plays a part.
I think you answered the next part. You're looking at diversifying some locations, so thank you for that.
And all of our districts do house some local CTE, which is, and students from that district take that. So DeWitt has, in addition to the Anthropos Cafe being here, they have finance program and family and consumer science programs, and so they do. All of our districts have other programs that are housed there.
How does the RISA compare to other surrounding areas in terms of offerings and then participation of students?
I think proportionally, we're pretty spot on, you know, in terms of our enrollment, and based on, you know, if you go to Ingham, which obviously is a much bigger county, then you have higher enrollment. But then again, you're looking at population wise versus the population within. And we continue to explore, you know, new program opportunities as well. We've tried to put some things out there. You know, we've had agri-science, food and natural resources, because we know we have a lot of agriculture in our county. So far, we haven't had enough student interest to make that be a full-time position, but we continue to market and put it out there. Insurance is another one where I know that there is a huge need, and we put that out there before. We've included it in our course guide and on our application, and we had 2 students sign up. So sometimes the industry need is not necessarily, it's not always easy to convince students to sign up for that. So
The programs are strictly within the county, though. Do you do any cross-county programs as well? Like, I mean, could we have?
Oh, yes.
So,
yes, so any program, so like I know DeWitt oftentimes will send students to ERISA for things that we don't offer, and the vocational millage dollars do cover that cost.
Okay.
Yep. So if we don't offer it here, and if they can take it at ERISA and it works out for them, then that's an option, so.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome to stick around. We won't hold it against you if you guys want to. And the budget presentation I've heard is riveting.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm a put mine.
switch a laptop here and the technology works, right? That's been a little bit tricky.
Isn't that letting you in?
No. I'll try it again. Sorry for the delay. Thanks for your patience. I'm here tonight to talk to you about our sex ed advisory board and some recommendations and some changes to our sex ed curriculum, some quite minor changes in actuality. I'm Brian Depker, the curriculum director, and I also serve as the sex ed supervisor for the district, one of my many hats here. While I get set up, I'm joined by several amazing educators. Let them introduce themselves and their roles.
Hi, I'm Heidi Bovita, teach health here at the middle school, right on the other side of this wall, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
And I'm Elaine Blake, and I teach family and consumer science at the high school, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders.
And I'm Jody Kaler, I'm the humanities academic specialist, but my minor is in health, and so I've kind of joined in with the Steve and some of the work that we've been working on over the last year.
All right. Saw some pictures of my dog. was not intended, but go ahead. All right. So again, the Sex Ed Advisory Board, we'll talk about that in just a moment here, is something that if schools in the state of Michigan wish to, as a groundswell of parent support or administrator support and so on, it's part of the state statute that we have extra layers of really kind of administrative pieces in there to make sure that we are satisfying lots and lots of community input and we're upholding the values of our community. So that's something that we meet every couple of years at least. And during COVID, it got a little bit tough to do that. And that's why this is our first time we're bringing new curriculum recommendations to you since before the pandemic. But here are some of the roles of the Sex Ed Advisory Board. We establish program goals and objectives, right, for pupil knowledge and skills that are likely to reduce the rates of sex, pregnancy, and STDs. We review and recommend materials and methods to the board, taking into consideration the district's needs, demographics, and trends. We'll get to that through some survey pieces later, including but not limited to teen pregnancy rates, STD rates, and incidents of sexual violence and harassment. The SEAB, which is made up of mostly parents, non-district parents, and other members of the community, evaluates, measures, and reports the attainment of program goals and objectives. That's something that's done biannually. So those are our goals from the Sex Ed Advisory Board. The actual sex ed and reproductive health program philosophy here, developed in the last couple of years by our educators and myself, is our mission is to offer comprehensive sex education and HIV/STI prevention curriculum that is medically accurate and age and developmentally appropriate for all students in grades K-12, including students with special needs. The curriculum is designed to recognize and represent the diversity of our students and community and aims to be inclusive of everyone regardless of the race, class, family structure, religion, sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Instruction will be implemented with a trauma-informed lens that avoids strategies that invoke fear, shame, or further trauma. Some of that data we talked about that informs the Sex Ed Advisory Board. Just recently here in the past year, we've taken a statewide survey called MyFi. I'll talk about in a moment. Dr. Spicker and I talked and said if this is going to be a review year, it might be coming out of COVID, and it's been a while since we did something like this. The consortium we work with out of Eaton Lisa, who gives us a lot of guidance on this, about what the state law says and what our best practices. They had developed a local survey we could give folks to get perceptions of what should be taught and when. And the big one I'm going to show you here, we had 406 respondents over roughly a month of that, so that's quite a big N size with which to draw some conclusions, pretty evenly distributed throughout the parent group up and down the grade level, so I was pretty happy with the responses we got. And at one point we asked if a set of lessons in sex ed or reproductive health were offered at an age-appropriate grade level, would you allow your children to participate? And as you can see here, overwhelmingly, almost 95% of respondents said yes. Little over 5% said no. That's a piece of data. We also know that when we offer sex ed and reproductive health in our schools, we typically have an opt-out rate, which we'll talk about here in a minute too, that when we, by law, teach sex ed, we have to get everything approved. Parental notice has to go home in a timely fashion, and parents are given ample opportunity to opt their students out of portions or all of the sex ed curriculum. And so when we offer that, we have this data piece of what kind of philosophically people are at. When we actually have people opt out, we find that around 1% or even less than 1% of parents do opt out. So when people vote with their feet, they're supportive of the program. Last but not least, I think it's important to note that some districts around the state don't have sex ed. Some had it and lost it, et cetera. Some have never had it because of the extra stipulations, extra hoops to jump through. And Mrs. Bovita and I were thinking here, she was a student here a number of years ago. I've been around since 2005 as a young teacher, and we were trying to think about when this started, and we're thinking probably the 80s, maybe even the 70s. So we might have, at least have several decades of history, of precedent here of the community wanting this, supporting this, and obviously that continues today. The other piece of survey data is something that's given biennially to most schools in the state. It's called MyFi. It's the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth. It is an online student health survey offered by the Michigan Department of Education and Health and Human Services to support local and regional needs assessment. So we give this to students at grade 7, 9, 11. Obviously the topics will vary as far as maturity level, but it asks about behaviors including substance abuse, violence, physical activity, nutrition, sexual behavior, and emotional health, and again in grade 7, 9, 11. Also measures risk and protective factors, predictive of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use and violence. And again, like with all of these pieces, there are notices that go out to parents well in advance, and then several parents every year do opt their students out. So that is communicated, and students can, families can and do opt out at certain points for this. When we get the data back, and it's kind of hard to read, and that's not the point, is I want to show you this is more about lots of data we get back here, and we kind of have to meet. That's one thing the SEAV does to make sense of the data, spot trends from former administrations, and then talk about how that's going to feed forward into our recommendations, into changes we want to propose, either to lessons, units, or curricula. And we give it to the middle school, we give it to the high school. The questions change and become a little bit more adult, obviously with the high school. And then Mrs. Bovita was going to give you an example of how we did that. So we take these big, massive tranches of information, and from the 2018 submission to this last fall,
you know, 2021, 22. Yeah, spring.
Okay, so a nice takeaway, something that we think that we made an impact on.
So again, I'm Heidi Bovita. I pulled just one of the many questions from the sexual health portion of the MyFi. And at the top you can see 2017-18. One of the questions has to do with of students who are sexually active, which ones used condoms during their last sexual intercourse. And at that time of 36 students, there was 63.2% reporting use of a condom. And in our previous update to our curriculum, one of the areas of need that we noted was more education around condom use as prevention. And we updated that lesson. And I was very excited when I was looking at these numbers to see, you know, of course, this is all to do with my lesson teaching, that this number went way up. So we have actually less kids who are sexually active in our 21-22 data. Pandemic, I'm sure, had something to do with that. But even with that, the number of students reporting use of a condom increased. And so that's being an abstinence-based district, our messaging is always that abstinence is the only 100% effective method of protection. That's always the standard. However, we are abstinence-based, which means it's our duty to teach forms of protection. And at the 8th grade level, condoms, that's what we're teaching. The reason we included this particular item is because one of the items we're looking at updating at our high school level, which Elaine will talk to you about, is to provide contraception kits which show and provide additional information and visuals of different forms of contraception that line up with the lessons that are already being taught. So our thinking is, they're listening, they're paying attention. I will tell you, they lean in, they're looking at me, they're raising their hands, so they want to know this information, and it's encouraging to see that it seems to be getting through. So just one example we can pull from our most recent update.
And again, this type of data feeds forward into one of the recommendations from the Sex Ed Advisory Board. We'll call back to this slide. At our most recent Sex Ed Advisory Board meeting, we did, in addition to looking at MyFi, in addition to looking at some of the other factors or program goals, etc., we looked at the current curriculums, which you can access online. And we have curriculums at Herbeson Woods, our 4-5 building, our middle school, the 6, 7, 8 building, and of course our high school. And again, those are all really shaped by what is age appropriate at that level. Right? So we really tried, and that question was done in earnest. Like if you were given choice of having age appropriate instruction to your student, we strive to make sure that's the case. And that was a big piece of the survey to see where the community at was as far as what does age appropriate mean. Of course, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So.
And to add to that, it all lines up with our Michigan health education standards, which are aligned to the national health education standards. So that really ensures that age appropriate component is there.
The piece under here is, like I said, in the scope of things, a couple of minor recommendations from the SEAB, the SEAB this year. One is an updated HIV lesson, which we'll talk about in just a minute, which will be taught at 5th grade. And then another is our contraception kits at the high school. So we'll talk about that when we get to the high school slide. So these are links, and when we post these into the presentation on the website, you can look and kind of explore and poke around the different curriculums. And again, we utilize a product, and it kind of cracks people up to hear the title of this, but it's very effective, good curriculum. It's called Puberty, the Wonder Years. But the jazz fingers, right? For 4th and 5th graders. And it's a really good introduction to changes in kids' bodies and emotions and feelings, and all done at an age-appropriate level. One thing that the state has mandated since the 1990s is that we have an HIV lesson about that and other communicable diseases, but especially HIV at each level. So an elementary lesson, a middle school lesson, and a high school lesson. And so as long as we teach once in those 3 bands, we've satisfied the state law. We have done that, and we have an HIV lesson. We had one that was about 20 years old, and we thought it was about time to get updated on. And so we have selected an HIV lesson. Again, you can click on it and review. I should mention at this point too that once the SEAB recommends changes to the curriculum, by law we're bound to have 2 separate hearings. So people can come out, examine. We kind of got our 7th grade science fair kind of on, got some placards out and some poster board, and just, hosted a couple of nights here, one in January, one on February 1st, and really described what the changes were. We're here and available for to ask questions and to gather feedback. So that happened, and again, we were asking for an HIV lesson, and again, folks were able to look at that on those 2 nights. And again, if you wanted to click here, you could take a look at that. The lesson here is put forward by the Michigan Model Curriculum, which is by far and away the most common health curriculum used in the state, so it's very mainstream. And that's done in cooperation, once again, with the Michigan Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services. So it's kind of a Michigan-oriented, Michigan-created, and for Michigan students. So all we're asking for tonight, the board is asking for approval, is just to get the updated lesson, and that is required. At the middle school, we reviewed the current curriculum, and that's where Mrs. Bobina teaches. So we looked at that, and then we also explored some changes to core curricula down the road, but we're not ready to kind of announce any changes yet, or we're just looking at staying current in that space and making sure that our lessons and our units are as up to date as they can be. So right now, no recommendations from the Sex Ed Advisory Board as far as the middle school. So finally, we get to the high school, and we do have a recommendation here. Again, we have links about the 9th grade health class, which covers healthy and responsible relationships, HIV, other STIs, pregnancy prevention. We have links to the goals and objectives, the learning and the SLOs, student learning objectives. And then also we have the class that Mrs. Blake teaches, is Family and Consumer Science, and that's Parenting and Child Development, Personal Living, Family and Society. These are all, again, all live links if you want to get more information once taught. What is being recommended for board approval by the Sex Ed Advisory Board are 2 items. One is a contraceptive kit, and another is a guide to contraceptive kit. And want to share that contraception, as you mentioned, right, has been taught for several years, been approved, I don't know when, long ago, here by the board. So that's something that we've taught in DeWitt for probably decades as well. And then this is not only just able to talk about it philosophically, it's going to be able to show kids what we're talking about when we talk about contraception. And this is something that when we get together with our Eaton RESA folks from Holt and Hazlitt and Lansing schools, Pocahontas, and on, almost everybody else has this already approved, and they're kind of like, you guys need that. It's a really important thing, if we want to help make sure that kids are knowledgeable and making good choices. So here are pictures of those 2 things. One is, and I don't know if Elaine, you
Yeah,
want to
I
speak to
can
that?
say, so I think just a little context as well. We have a Dr. Crampton, who is our OBGYN on our seat. I sent her several links to contraceptive kits, and these were 2 that she thought would be really good. I asked her which one, and she said, why not both? And I said, yeah, that's a great idea because they're 2 totally different kits. So one is, both of them focus on efficacy. So of course we always want to know, which ones, how well they work as far as prevention, pregnancy prevention. The one on the right will actually have manipulatives, right? So the students can see them, hold them, manipulate them, if you will. And then on the left-hand side, it has a lot more data. So again, efficacy rates, and it also shows which part of the body that certain contraceptive piece goes to. So yeah, I'm just really excited about it, and I think it's time.
And that one's more of like a showcase. It's got
Yeah,
this
more
glass
like a
cover,
board,
and
yeah.
like anything that, and just have it up as like a display, or the other one has like the parts that people can look at. And one of the things Dr. Crampton mentioned was that a lot of adults come into our office not having any idea about what any of these things are and what options they have. And so I think that was kind of our wake-up call that
It's time.
that's kind of scary to think that an adult is walking into an office not knowing about the options of their own body.
So again, I think this is done with the background of, our entire programming is abstinence-based, right? So this is, the foundation is that choosing not to have sex or waiting. Yes.
Sorry, there's a very quick question about these. Are these going to be available to students on an individual basis, or are they just available in classrooms for them to look at?
Just in classrooms during the lesson.
During the lesson.
So as Mr. Decker said, the lessons are already approved. So right now, I'm literally teaching them off of a sheet, a worksheet. This is a condom, this is the efficacy rate. This is a diaphragm, this is the efficacy rate. And of course, if they're being used correctly, consistently. So now it'll actually give an image and a picture, what they're learning about on the worksheet.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
And everything
That-
is
that-
inventoried, and so before the students
Yeah.
leave the classroom, you have to make sure that all of the materials are left behind, that no one's walking out with anything. That there are some precautions that have to be taken when you're demonstrating.
No.
Did you hear those middle school kids? Not that they didn't see these, but.
No, and all of the manipulatives in the right-hand tip, they're all fake. They're not real devices. They're meant for being in classrooms for modeling. And I think it was mentioned this is all opt-out. So anytime parent doesn't want their child to learn about this lesson.
So that's really it. Again, like I said, kind of a minor ask in the scope of all the different things that have been approved over the years. I think we have good rationale there, but I'd be very open to any questions or feedback that you may have.
Just a little bit of feedback. I have a fifth grade daughter right now who's gone through a good portion of this curriculum so far the last couple of years, and I just want to say thank you to all of you. I'm very impressed, and it's nice to see her maturity to come home and ask responsible questions, not only about herself and her body, but about others, and have it in a conversation in a very mature way that I did not expect from our level. So thank you all for that. I appreciate it. It saved me a lot of trouble.
That's why we're here.
All right, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's on the remote. You just press freeze again.
Thank you. So I know you have a lot of presentations tonight, so just kind of in the interest of time, we'll move through the budget update fairly quickly, but certainly ask questions along the way if you have them. The governor released her proposal. The governor released her proposal late Wednesday morning, so we spent the last couple of days trying to digest that, see what's there. I'm still waiting for House and Senate fiscal analysis to come out. That is a fairly detailed budget that will help me sometimes pick up on some things I haven't seen in documents that are there. But what we'll do is we'll run through the proposal at a higher level, and then we'll dive down a little bit into what it's looking like at a district level as far as the numbers go. So the governor's proposal, the first item is that she proposed a 5% increase in the foundation allowance, and that translates to a $458 per pupil increase over this current year's budget. She's also proposed an increase in special education categorical as well as the at-risk categorical, and that goes back to some research collaboratives that were done over several years, and with that in her proposal for this year. The retirement rate, which has been relatively flat the last 2 to 3 years, is up substantially. It's going to be up 3%. But what you'll see, the two bullets below that, they're continuing some retirement categoricals. So the first one is the UAAL and the Ipswich cost offset. Those have been on the books for a number of years, keeping those consistent year over year. But they're putting more money into the retirement normal cost offset categorical, which, well, it's a lot of words, but basically it means some dollars to offset that 3% retirement rate increase. So although we'll have an increase on the expenditure side, we'll have some offsets on the revenue side to help mitigate some of that. And then the governor's proposal is continued with the early literacy and voc ed categoricals that we've had for a number of years. Below that, we talk about some continuing programs that are new in the fiscal year that we're in right now, so 22-23. The governor had dedicated, through the state budget process, $150 million for both mental health categoricals as well as school safety categoricals. They're increasing that to $300 million in her proposal and $318 million on the school safety side, but it's notated that that's used over a 2-year period of time. So it's in essence putting $150 million into 3 fiscal years worth of budgets. We finally got our hands on our numbers for this year, so February, what is this, the 13th? We finally saw what our numbers are, and I'm hoping that they'll show up on our state aid report. And then we can start really moving forward with the planning for the dollars that have been allocated for this year that we can spend next year, and then also start to look at some planning for future years if this does carry its way through the entire budget process. And then this next slide is really a laundry list of some new programs with some substantial dollars tied to them. They're all one-time funds unless I've notated that it's different within the line items. So first is $160 million of state funds that would go for ongoing funding for free breakfast and lunch to all students. So that'd be regardless of income level. Every student that walks through the doors would be eligible for a free breakfast or lunch. Next bullet is $300 million, and I'm trying to get a little more detail on this. So it's $300 million, but it's over 2 years. So $150 million for 23-24, and $150 million for the following year for early literacy curriculum review and assessment, as well as training for pre-K through 5 teachers, coaches at that level as well as administrators at that level. That's a lot of money to put into training alone, but it does talk about some curriculum assessments. So we really need to see, I think, a more fleshed out proposal from the governor of what she might anticipate districts using these funds for. The next bullet point is $300 million for, and it's actually a supplemental for this year, but can be used and likely would be used next year for what's being called the My Kids Back on Track program. And she's kind of pivoted from lost learning to now it's called unfinished learning. You've probably heard headlines of tutoring and some of those types of services. That's really what the intention of this line would be. I got my hands on something this morning that says, though, that you have to, districts are going to be required to 100% match the funds to be eligible for this. What I don't know is what does a match requirement mean? If you're doing some things that fall under the criteria, can you count that, or would you have to allocate new dollars towards being eligible? It's kind of a little one-line sentence in the legislation, and that'll be another area that we'll really have to watch and see what that means. I didn't see that until this morning, so I think that's important. There's $500 million for future school infrastructure projects. A couple years ago, there was some money that was put into a reserve fund for this purpose. She's proposed putting another $500 million into it. The thing that I liked was that it also talked about a mechanism for how those funds could be dispersed. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that they just get dropped somewhere and then districts sit around trying to figure out how they might be able to access them. So again, that's something that we'll want to watch. And then there's $300 million for what she's deemed health and safety infrastructure. But it does note that this is needs-based. And in my history of being in this district for a dozen years is that typically when it's a needs-based award, we either are not eligible or we're only eligible for a fraction of an allocation. So that's another one that we'll have to watch. The governor's put $150 million into matching grants for electric bus purchases. Unfortunately, everything I know today does not address infrastructure. I think if you're not addressing infrastructure, it's really hard to move forward with any viable electric bus program. So again, that's something we'll have to watch. I provided feedback actually to our business officials organization saying that that'd be something that I think they really need to look at to build that infrastructure before you can really get some of this off the ground. And then the governor's proposal has $245 million for, sorry for the wordiness, it's called back-end school district support activities consolidation. So that's basically consolidating services, business office, transportation. And this one to me was interesting because you typically see that proposed from a Republican. So to see it from a governor who's a Democrat, that was an interesting proposal. So when the House and Senate release their budgets, I'm curious to see if they'll have similar proposals in there. And then the bottom two are really monies that they'll put into some reserve funds. So they're allocating the governor's allocating $500 million in her budget proposal for the MIPS's reserve fund. And again, MIPS's is a retirement system. So it's to put it there almost for a rainy day. Some of the feedback that we've provided so far is, wouldn't it make more sense to put money into the system now to help fund it versus setting it aside and not letting it be used for the program? So we'll see where that goes. And then finally, she's proposed $900 million into a school aid rainy day fund. The state has a rainy day fund, but this is the first time that anyone has proposed a separate rainy day fund that's specifically tied to school aid. So that's, again, a lot of new programming. There's a lot of other smaller programs that have been identified in her proposal, but those are the largest ones. And then looking at how this currently would translate into our budget picture. And again, some of these numbers are going to be subject to change as we learn more, but we start with our budget for 22-23. We have a budget that was approved, the surplus of about $344,000. If we have a foundation increase at the $458 per pupil, that's about $1.4 million of additional revenue. The increase in the special ed categorical is about $41,000. That's an estimate. And the increase in the at-risk is estimated to be about $27,000. The next line item is at MIPS's categorical, so the increase helped offset the retirement rate increase. This is a number that I'm guessing will change. I don't know up or down, but I had to try to extrapolate out what I thought that would be based upon the trend of what we're receiving this year, the increase in that line item in the budget, and we just kind of said, okay, well, that's what our increase will be. The House and Senate fiscals do a good job of doing some district comparisons of what they expect districts will get. Those haven't been released yet, but I'd like to be able to compare that against the number I came up with. And then the number below that is a decrease for our special ed prior year categorical adjustment. So we always talk at the amendment time that the state's a year behind in how they reimburse special ed costs. And so this year we had a higher than normal catch-up dollar amount, so we'll still be positive next year, just won't be as positive as it was this year. Interest continues to trend well. We know that the Fed's bumped the rate up again in anticipation of 1 or 2, maybe 25 basis point increases this year. So I'm projecting some increase in interest income. And then we talked about that earlier with Jennifer Branch, but last year, so not this current fiscal year, but the prior fiscal year, we had a retirement or a resignation, I think it was, of one of our VOCAT programs. We unfortunately couldn't find a new teacher, so we had to sub that for the year. That translated into less revenue that we received from CC RESA for VOCAT. Now that we have a teacher in place, I expect that we'll get back up to pretty close to what that level was 2 years ago. So we put that back into the budget. We put some estimates in for DEA, DAA, DESPA, and non-affiliated wage adjustments. We've also rolled up teacher steps, longevity, and lateral pay. We've moved insurance, so we moved to the hard caps on our medical, and then an estimate for dental and vision. And then that increase, that 3% in retirement expense right now is projected to be about $571,000. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more and see if I can't maybe drive that down just a little bit. But that's ballpark of where we'll land. Utilities, we'll have some rate increases for next year, and then with the maintenance building coming online, some things with construction, with air conditioning, I'm anticipating some increase in utilities. I'm hoping we'll have some cost savings because we'll be shifting at Herbison during construction this summer to LED lighting throughout the building. So that should help bring some costs down, but then adding the air conditioning and bringing the new building online, we'll have some increases in costs there. We don't get our property casualty increase until usually May or June, but I'm anticipating an increase as cybersecurity continues to be a trending driver of insurance costs. So that's just an estimate at this time. And then I've also built in an increase in our teacher substitute rates. So if you remember, we had a fairly substantial increase this year because we held those rates for so long because we're trying to stay within the consortium rates. I would prefer to do some small incremental increases every year so we hopefully don't ever have to come forward with a substantial increase in any 1 year. So this would build in a small increase for the substitute rate for next year. And then as we slide forward, we take that subtotal from the last page. We have some ESSER 3 funds this year that we're using. Those will get backed off. And then we had some one-time equalization expenditures that we've been using for technology, curriculum, and some other areas that we have to pull off as well. Likely we won't expend that whole 613 this year. We have a large textbook adoption that likely will come next year. We want to try to hold some of those dollars, but I want to back them off the budget. And then when we get in the amendment for next year, we'll replace what's actually left. And then finally, just 11T. So we've got in the budget the 11T revenue, and there's a bit of a mismatch with how we're planning to spend those funds with our specialists and the paras and then the AP. So when you take the 11T revenue into account, kind of back that off, and then add in those 11T expenditures, we're really at a kind of a structural balance of about 273, and again, that's really high level. So that's the budget. Kind of start to drill down to the district level. And so finally, we'll have to continue reviewing enrollment. So we have February count was last week, so we'll work through that. And that starts our process of rolling grades up and seeing kind of what sections are going to look like, how many students we have, school choice decisions that we'll make, bring to the board, and that'll play into the reviewing of staffing. We actually had a meeting with the principal this morning to talk about some scheduling and staffing at their building. Senate and House budget proposals, we're hearing right now, possibly late March, but likely early April for those to get released. And that will really help us see how they've aligned. I think they're going to be fairly close, but it'll give us a chance to see where there might be some differences to really get a sense of what that budget might shape up for. Still likely a budget won't be approved by the state until June because they like to get through the May revenue estimating conference before they finalize. But I think you're going to find that they're going to be fairly aligned in April, and then just kind of waiting for that May CRAC. And then finally, we'll continue to work with cabinet on staffing and other issues. We'll schedule finance committee meetings with the board as needed, and then if there is new information, we'll provide an update on March 13th. Again, it's a lot of information fairly quickly without any questions.
Rob, is there discussion of any policy changes that would affect our healthcare costs or anything else
Possibly.
that have been relatively stable over the years? And then the other question is, look into your crystal ball and tell us you know, 3 years down the line, are we gonna be seeing $450 increases per pupil? Or are we gonna go back to normal of a couple, maybe $100?
Yeah, so I'll start with the second question. I would be surprised if we stick with $450-ish in increases going forward. We're in a kind of an unprecedented time where there's billions of dollars available from the state, and that's why you see things like this. You know, what's a little unnerving, someone sitting in a finance seat, is we haven't seen the balance sheets yet, but they basically spent everything. I'm hearing that the general fund might be in the $20 million range if all of her proposals go through. School aid fund might be down to a couple $100 million, which on a, I don't know what they're up to, $13-15 billion. School aid budget might be $17 billion now. It's not a lot. Now there is $900 million in a rainy day fund that could help smooth some things out, but they're spending the money. And so, yeah, it's a great point. I would not envision next year.
They spent $9 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you look here, I mean, just on this page alone, you're at what, $3 to $4 billion of kind of one-time fund uses. So, yeah, they've spent that time, and that's where I'm waiting for the House and Senate fiscal reports, because they'll provide those balance sheets. But MSBO has basically said the numbers that they're looking at, they pretty much spent everything down. So that's a great question. No, I don't anticipate seeing $450 increases going forward. Hopefully we don't get in any type of recession, but I think we're going to be back more into a, you know, 1, maybe 200 if we're lucky. So the first question, and then the first question that you asked, yes, there's likely going to be proposals. We've heard rumblings of moving away from a hard cap to maybe an 80%, 80-20, which is one of the options that is available to districts, maybe a 90-10, maybe a fully covered. And so we'll have to watch and see how those play out. And how quickly, because if they pass something now, they would, I think, would need 2/3 vote in the Senate for immediate effect, which means you're kicking it out a year, maybe 2, depending on how quickly they move through. So those are things that we do have to watch as well, beyond what's just in the proposals today.
And given those policy changes, I mean, because I haven't been around since those things were enacted 10, 12 years ago, what is the typical kind of phase-in for something like that? Is that, I know the law might take a little while, but I mean, is that like a 3-year thing? Like in 3 years we need to start worrying about this, or is that like a little bit quicker?
Yeah, I mean, I think once the legislation starts moving, we're probably on a track of 1 to 2 years of needing to be planning for something. And it depends on how they roll it out and what the requirements are. But you know, I think the only thing that we would have going for us as far as slowing that down is I just don't think they're going to be able to get anything with immediate effect. And that all these goes to another legislative session to plan for whatever might come through.
I wouldn't be so sure about that. I think there's some hard feelings about last week's stuff in the Senate, considering what people call a nuclear option, doing it with House to the voice vote for that.
Yeah, and that's true, and I've heard that. I think hopefully they can think that through, because they can play both ways. But yeah, I agree. They were not happy with what happened on the floor last week. That's a good point.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Brian, back up. I'm going to take this the wrong way. I'm going to go basketball game, so I'm going to be leaving. I'm going to turn things over to John. It has it's not a reflection on your presentation.
I would have taken offense, Jason.
All right.
It's certainly my pleasure to be back up here again. I'm not sure if it's your pleasure, but let's see. I'm here tonight to give you our biannual update on our benchmarks. This has been something that, this is the one for February, we'll do this again in June. Law was passed in September 2021 that basically required this, right? This has been something that a lot of school districts have been doing, us included. There's about 4 or 5 different vendors that offer benchmark assessments. We were partnering with NWA, so we were ready to kind of roll when this came around. It had always been recommended. Sometimes we were even given reimbursements to do this, but it was never required until the pandemic. And the state legislature decided that was the best way to get an idea of what was happening in districts where learning was at, learning loss, etc. So what we'll do here is follow the state statute, and I'm presenting our updates tonight, in February, and again in June. Now last June, I was already to present, and I got COVID. And so Dr. Spicker helped me out. So hopefully in June, when it comes time to do this again, I'll be hale and healthy and ready to go. So anyway, so these are going to be some familiar slides. We've been doing this, 4 and 5 times now over the last few years. But I do think for folks who have not seen this before, or we post this on the website for context there, it's important to have these slides in here. And probably for those of you who are in the trenches every day in education and having that jargon down, it's probably better to kind of give a little bit of a review over what all these acronyms and terms mean. So when we talk about NWEA, that's our benchmark assessment. That stands for Northwest Evaluation Association. They've got about a 50-year history. They're out of University of Oregon and thereabouts. And they offer a product called MAP, which stands for Measure of Academic Progress. It's an online assessment that is aligned to Common Core. One thing to note about MAP is it's computer adaptive. So it's not like the test we took when we were in school. Students on a computer, and a first grader can progress in reading until they hit 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, wherever their level is, and it finds a spot where they start to get kind of every other one or 50% of them right and wrong, so they kind of level out, and that's how they decide, okay, this student is at this grade level. All right, so it is adaptive. Some tests, especially like, we used to give a version of ACT called ACT Explorer at the middle school, and because that was a static paper pencil test, I had a little bit of a range. I could see if a kid, a 6th grader, was like a 9th grade learner, but I couldn't see if they were like a post-college learner. It was kind of capped either way. Nice thing about a computer adaptive test is that it lets students find their kind of age level, grade level of performance up and down kind of the range there. So benchmarking, what we want to do for a goal, and I'll talk about, we chose a rigorous goal, and that'll be important to keep in mind here. Across our system, our goal is to have at least 80% of students performing at or above grade level. And this is what's known as like an RTI or MTSS triangle or pyramid. The idea is that if you have 80% of your students operating at or near grade level, responding to that tier 1, down here tier 1 core instruction that everybody gets, that's a healthy system. And if you're at 80%, that means the students who inevitably don't do well, either they're nearly proficient or not proficient at all, are kind of far behind. If you have an 80, 15, 5 kind of breakdown there, that gives you the resources, the time to strategically address the kids who are in that kind of near proficiency band, and that 5 to 10% of kids are at that kind of lower, they are well below benchmark type of thing, and we call them tier 3. If that's only kept to 5 to 10%, our system can absorb that, and we can intervene in a more intensive manner. So we like to think of 80s, 15s, and 5s as kind of our ideal. Of course, you like to have every student, right, be proficient. But lacking that, this is kind of the lowest we want to go and have healthy systems there. So that's a little bit of the background on why I'm going to show you some 80% threshold and what that means. All right, so our goal for the 2022-23 school year, very similar to last year. We'd like to cut each respective shortcoming relative to our goal of 80% of students achieving at grade level, at least in half. For example, if 70% of a grade level are at average or better on MAP, this NWA test, we want to close that gap to at least 75% by the end of the school year. And again, state law says you need to show growth. I'm telling you that almost all of our students show growth at one time or another, and certainly in aggregate we show lots of growth. I'll give you a table on that later. But this is DeWitt. Didn't want to be easy. Wanted to be a little more rigorous than that. I'll show you in a moment here. We will work with quintiles a lot at the kind of building level, district level, and I thought, why not take those things that are happening internally and talk about it to the board and more to the public. So we have chosen a more ambitious goal. while some districts out there are saying, hey, we'll show growth, and as soon as students show growth, we're like, check. We've picked a very ambitious goal. The quintiles, all right, so these colors are important, and the names here for what I'm about to show you. NWA and their map reporting breaks students into, they compare us to a million or so students who take this nationwide, and then at that point, they break us into percentiles, both for achievement and for growth. And so the lowest quintile is red and is known as low. The next quintile from 20 to 40% is low average and is orange. Then average, yellow, high average is green. And then the 81st to 100th percentile is considered high performance, and it is blue. So those colors and those labels will matter. So we look at a report here, and this is a sample district. And I believe the N here is 16, so this must be some kind of a classroom breakdown. Maybe not, a little higher. So this is a grade level here, but you see what happens here. We've been for years given this, where we say, hey, we want 80% of kids in blue, green, or yellow. And that's going to say that they're either at grade level proficiency, above grade level, or near it. So that tier 1, our core universal instruction, is designed and will be benefiting those students. All right, so that's the type of thing that we saw and thought, aha, we're going to start really paying attention to this and honing in on this. And that's what we've done. Another spot where these show up, lots and lots of reports coming out of NWA. Some are for district level leaders like me, some are for students, some are for parents. There are a bevy that are for classroom instructors, like this one is a new one called Class Report. And you can tell, say an English teacher could tell once their English class takes math, they can look and say, all right, what's the distribution like amongst my students? Do I have a, in this case, it would be heavily skewed towards high achieving students. How am I going to respond instructionally? What am I going to do for the students, the few left that are a little bit behind? You see all different types here. Sometimes you see kind of a bimodal, where we have a lot of kind of mid to high students, a lot of low students, and so you kind of got two classes in one. That will impact, hopefully, what a classroom teacher decides to do pedagogically within their classroom. So. And then finally, student reports. You may have seen this one as a parent. This is a rainbow report, we call it, just kind of locally. And you see those colors again. You see where a student progresses. This particular student started in that average, progressed to the green and the average high, and then back to the high. And it's just kind of maintaining that there a few years back. But this gives you an example. You see proficiency lines, or where they're maybe proficient in PSAT, MSTEP, where their grade level is performing, where the nation performs. This is a really useful, and it's a dynamic. You can hover over things, click on them, and see different things. It's really useful when teachers are looking at the history and performance of students. All right, so that's the quintiles, that's NWA map. Again, aligned to the Common Core. We use it in math and in reading, K through 8. When we talk about test scores, I'm a former middle school teacher, middle school principal, high school principal. And I know that this is just a sliver of who students are. We're going to talk about X students where this proficient and so on. I want to keep it in perspective, take the global view here a little bit, that we're talking about reading and math only. We're not talking about science, social studies, arts, physical fitness, et cetera, et cetera. And achievement really represents only a slice of what we do at DPS and that student experience. So the unwritten curriculum, where people give rich experiences and form great relationships and teach really important rules about how to treat each other all up and down our system, that's not captured here, right? But we know, I walk these halls every day, my students come home, my 3 students who are in this district, and talk to me about the lessons they're learning, and a lot of times they're not lessons about math, right? They're lessons about how to treat each other, how to be a good human. And so again, I know people get riled up here a little bit. It's a slice, but it's also an important slice, right? How are kids responding to the Common Core? Are they learning to read and write at an appropriate level? So now this might seem like duh, but I think it's useful to look at. So if you took the nation's all million kids to take the NWA math, this is what the distribution looked like, right? And so when we achieve, and what you'll see here is our blue, green, and yellow, we want it stretched up to the 80th percentile. So we're trying to be above the national average here. And we believe we can do that. But just to give you the perspective here. And again, why do I put the lower scores up top? Well, that fits our triangle model where we're saying we got a core in the green, Yellow, that's a smaller number, and an even smaller red. So this would be core students that are responding to our core curriculum, tier 1, tier 2 students who need some targeted, they're almost or right there, need some targeted intervention, and then students who are well behind, hopefully they're only about 5% of the population in any given grade level course, whatever. We're going to target them for intensive intervention. So that's why I kind of flip it around here when we do this kind of stacked bar chart here. So our key, we talked about SED because part of the law was to break down by demographics. So SED is socioeconomically disadvantaged. SWD is students with disabilities, and SOC is students of color. One last thing before I get to those charts that I want to, again, give you perspective. There's a lot of gobbledygook over here, but this is what, after 2020, they did new norms, NWA, and said, this is where the average student in grade K for winter should be scoring around a 150 on that RIT, which is the kind of scoring system that uses on MAP. So you can see where you should be. So what we've done, I cribbed this from a chart that Dr. Spicker had put together for you last year when I was ill. And you see over on the left, I just want to give perspective again, that our scores for this winter are down the middle. And then on the right are the 2020 national norms. So you see in most cases, we're above the national norm, and in some cases, we're well above. Some cases, we're close. And I want to say, too, this is my other caveat, is that these are pre-COVID norms. These norms were developed in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. We are comparing ourselves to students before COVID, and that's okay. You know, I think that's, we want to get back there, so we want to be comparing ourselves and driving that improvement. I think it's worth mentioning that across the state, nation, what I've seen, what I've read, what I've observed, what I've talked to, local leaders, students right now are not performing where they were pre-pandemic. And so the fact that we're comparing our performance now to pre-pandemic, we have to keep that in mind, right? And if we see something where we're really rocking it, like that's a big thing to celebrate, because it's like, wow, these are kids that hadn't dealt with that, you know, we're still rocking that grade level. Now, and in spots where we're a little bit, you see some more growth or a little bit behind, you know, again, we're comparing ourselves to kids that did not have the pandemic to deal with as they were developing. All right, so now the meat of the presentation here. So I want to do first a fall to winter comparison here. So what we have on the left, we didn't give a presentation. It was posted on our website, but we did not give a presentation on it by law. On the left-hand side was our distribution K-8, so around 2,200 students or so that took in those grade levels and on the reading test. This is how our distribution went. So we kind of right at our goal of 80% of students right there. Either in the high, average, and average. And then unfortunately what we've seen over 2,200 students is a slight backslide. And we went through this last year too. And it's disappointing, we don't like it, and we're trying to rack our brains and talk through, you know, what might be causing that. Students basically here, right, we said instead of 7.8 students that are in the low up top, now 7.9 are, et cetera, you can kind of read there. You know, those are real kids. Those are real kids slipping against their peers in the country. And we want to get to the bottom of that. Now, I did want to look winter to winter, and I did that in this moment here too, and some of the numbers look a little better. So we're still trying to make sense of that as well. So this is our reading reporting of where our students were in aggregate K through 8 from fall to winter. And this is the same graph, but for math. All the math graphs are blue. There's a lot coming at you, right? So those are blue, and the other are gold. And you see here, very similar. Back in the fall, we were right on track, and we've slipped back a little bit. Now, again, you'll see here in a moment, NWA expects growth. So it's not like this is a static piece where like, oh, these kids must not have grown at all. The ones that slipped into different categories, you know, they very well, they probably did grow, but just not to the point that NWA was expecting or wanting, et cetera. But we're still within striking distance, right, of our goal of 80% at those 3 levels. So what we did see last year was a little bit of a bump back in the spring. So we could have a lot of discussions about, we tested right when we got back from a 2-week break, and how did that impact student focus and readiness, et cetera. And we are having those conversations. We may adjust in the future, maybe given a week in between some of those conversations just about when and how we're asking kids to do this. What might be behind that winter slump? Is it the lack of sunlight, vitamin C, I don't know. Things we deal with in Michigan, right? Now, I did want to look, it was an interesting thing to me too, to see the winter to winter comparison. It's not just fall to winter, but now we're talking about, and we're already talking about grade level to grade level. So it's last year's 7th graders to this year's 7th graders. Last year's 2nd graders to this year's 2nd graders. When we look at these type of things, we're looking at last year's tests at this time of year and all the kids that involves, and then to this year's tests and some new kids. So here's where we scored last winter. We can see we're a bit below as well, the 80% threshold there with the average performance. And then we did, I'm happy to say, this year's winter performance did outstrip last year. So while we did fall against ourselves in the fall, year on year on our winter performance, we're up a bit. So I thought that was encouraging, right? Maybe something we can build on. So we are slightly ahead of where we were, again, last winter in reading. Math, different story, very close, virtually similar. Kind of stood still last year, maybe even lost a touch as far as people sliding back against the national averages. This is one piece I wanted to preview for you folks that I'm looking at as well. One thing that our teachers are doing a lot of is not so much looking at the quintiles, but each student is given a growth score, like in the winter here, and then each student will be given a growth goal for the spring. And so we can track whether or not students are making their goals or not, how many points they were supposed to gain on each administration and test, and how many they actually gained, et cetera, et cetera. So let me just give you an example here. So this is our K-8 aggregate winter to winter. So last winter's scores, so this winter's scores. First of all, the first one was just winter 23. Our achievement percentile was 60%. At the average. So I took all the 2,200 kids, just took that column and averaged it. 60% of students, that was the average of where they're performing against their peers in the country. So above average, right, well above average. And then the same in math. And then this W2W is that winter to winter. So I look at the average growth percentile. So a growth percentile is saying, given, say my 7th grade daughter, if she scores a 54.2% in growth, that means she's growing at a rate higher than 54.1% of her peers across the country. And the remaining to 100, they're right 45 plus percent are growing faster than she is. Okay, so that's a growth measure. And again, so if we look at the average growth measure for our reading scores, again, growing above the national average as far as growth, 54.2%, winter to winter for our K-8, and 50 right smack dab middle average in the country growth in math. Then it's interesting to me, again, each individual student said they should have grown this much. This is what NWA says after these millions and millions of data points. The student scoring here in the fall should score by here in the winter, they should gain 8.9 points. And what we found is when we added all those up, the projected growth and all the observed growth, the actual growth that people made, that students made, we found that from winter to winter, our students actually grew 9.8 percentage points, 9.8 RIT points versus 8.9 RIT points. And so they achieved 110% of the growth they were intended to make, or NWA thought they would make in that winter to winter period. And then when we see with math, you see where some of this is spooky accurate, right? Where they looked at our 2,200 students where they scored last winter and said, hey, by next winter they should grow 10.1 points. And sure enough, 2,200 students grew 10.1 points, and we were 100% over our expected growth. So those are two pretty good measures. Again, and we're talking about pre-COVID measurements or expectations there, so our students are still achieving in spite of it all.
Yep, quick question, Brian. As you mentioned about the growth, and you said earlier that the levels can go up, the grade levels can go up until they start getting questions wrong and levels out.
Yeah.
So if you're in the high average bracket, is there a cap to how much you can grow, or because of the way that it can exceed grade level expectations, is there unlimited growth potential for those students as well?
I think at some point it caps out in high school, 11th, 12th grade, but if you're a 5th grader and you're growing into the suddenly 11th and 12th, you'll be at the 99th percentile, growth. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps.
And if you go back to the NWA RIT chart, you can see that there's a lot less expected growth. So these only go up to 8th grade. So once you get up to 9th and 10th grade, you might only see a 2-point growth, whereas if you're taking a look at kindergarten, it's more like,
They, you know, from
10,
winter
12
kindergarten to
points.
winter first grade, they're expected to make 20 points of growth,
Right,
right?
that makes sense.
And just, what we know from child development is kids start to make marginally less gains as they grow, type of thing. Kindergartners, preschoolers, 3-year-olds, 6-year-olds are like super learners, right? They're just soaking it all up and in, and that gets marginally tougher to move kids as we.
But it's also, stay on this for a second,
Yep.
because parents who are really interested in this and look at this, and especially some students who get fixated on the data, the standard deviation is higher than what the growth expectation is. So kids need to understand that if you didn't grow or you slid a little bit, that might be error, not that you're not as smart as what you were, so.
That's a good question, because parents will ask when they get their graphs at home,
Yeah.
right? Well, my kid made this huge jump, and look at now, they're in an 84th percentile for reading, but their growth is pretty low. And so I know that some students, especially higher grades, may get a little discouraged by that, but I just wanted to make sure that we're all looking at the same numbers and parents understand
Yeah.
what those mean.
Yeah, so it's a great example. I know when we get reports and the student scores a 200 on a RIT, it's, really they scored somewhere between 197 and 203 with an 80% chance, like that's likely, right? That's kind of the straight zone there. So we talk to our own children about that all the time. Sometimes we'll kind of like drop slightly or plateau, and I say, that's one data point, and we can take it for what it is, but it could be that you've grown and it's not showing it, right?
Right.
It's based on, where you're at in that margin of error. It's like polling.
Great, thank you.
These are all good questions there. So again, any other questions about this here? And again, what we can project, what NW projects, what NWA actually observes, and then the percentage of that, I think, is an interesting metric to say. Basically, in NWA, we had 100%, 10 points of growth out there, and we achieved 100% of it, right? Or we left 20% on the table, or 5%, etc. I think that might be something that the grade levels and the building levels could chew on. All right, one piece too that the state by law asking to do is break this down by demographic. And I won't spend too much time on, I've taken a lot of your time already, and we've had several presentations. This is our K-8 winter benchmark by quintile, but then at the bottom you see there are 6 different stacked bar graphs here. One is for overall, one is for our male-female breakdown, K-8. Then we have our students, our economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, how they perform with respect to others, and then students of color. And we see the same
Can I ask
groups.
you a question?
Yes.
It might be a dumb question, but what if you're a student that falls into all 3 of those categories? You're then showing up 3 times, it's a little bit skewed, or no?
You are showing up 3 times, but what it does is say, with our SED, we typically have 15% of our students are SED. And so it's taking that big end of 2,200 and breaking that down to 300 students. And it's showing you the quintiles within that. And so yes, you're counted, but I don't think it's a double count. This is a different category. We filter down from the 2,200. Are you a student with a disability? Yes, you are. So you count this one too. You're represented here, but I don't think it's being counted multiple times.
But it, okay. It's not counted multiple times, but we could be seeing it
You could.
multiple times
Yeah.
on these charts.
Yes, could there be a female student, low socioeconomic, has a disability, and a student of color? Yes, absolutely. And they would be showing up for representative here multiple times. All right, similar for winter, or excuse me, similar for math. And then by building, I did it for you as well. And then by tomorrow, when we post this, I will break it down by grade level as well. So this will get even more of a accordion here and spread out. So this is available online. This is available. This was shared with the board in the board packet. And so I won't belabor these pieces, but you can see the relative scores and kind of apples to apples, see where different buildings are operating.
So Brian, quick question on that. What are you doing in terms of interventions for students with disabilities? And looking at that, obviously, that has the biggest gap and the furthest from where we want to be ultimately in our goal.
Yeah.
So what are we trying to do to help improve those scores a little bit for that particular population?
Yeah, I mean, that's where, I am a parent of a student with a disability, so I can speak to this from the heart, really, and from experience, but also as a 20-year educator and someone who has a big heart for these folks. You know, the federal government mandates that we have advocates for them in school and their case managers, so special education teachers all have a caseload, and they are really responsible for making sure that they are getting all the interventions that they need when they write that individualized educational plan. A whole team of different psychologists and social workers, counselors, parents, teachers, and when the kids get older, the kids play a big role in it too. Really talk about their experience, talk about where their deficits are on a scientific level, and say, these are the interventions I'm going to need. So a lot of times interventions for special ed students are dictated by that kind of legal document. But yeah, I mean, when you have students, you know, this is kind of a misnomer too, because the students with disabilities, we're showing one monolith. I mean, that could be someone who has trouble walking, but cognitively or just fine. That could be someone who has a disability in that reason. You know, so there's so many different shades. It's almost a disservice that that's how they ask us to do it, but disabilities come in all different shades, right? So we really try to individualize each student about what they need to be as successful as they can be. And the sad fact, these are conversations I've had as parents, so on, you have conversations about what is the cognitive limit of a student with disabilities, and sometimes, you know, scoring in the average might be a great success, you know, for them. So sometimes the bar, you know, they're being compared here against their peers without disabilities. In some ways, this is just very unfair, right? So I think it's a good question, but we do have a very robust system to make sure that students with disabilities have federally protected, individualized interventions.
But anybody receiving attention for, say, special education would be in that group?
Yes.
That's categorized.
Does NWA allow you to compare those subcategories to their national subcategories, or do they only just give you the written?
I've not seen that. I've not seen that, but that might be a better kind of apples to apples comparison, right? You know? But again, every school district is going to be different. Does our special ed and students with disabilities mirror the nation? I mean, you have to think about that too. Do we have more kids who are otherwise health impaired, or have learning disabilities, or physical disability?
Disabilities would be tough, but
Yep.
economically disadvantaged students of color would be
A little more straightforward.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. So, but again, why did I choose these? Well, these are interesting subgroups that that we'll always keep an eye on anyway. But it's instructive about maybe gaps in our systems or equity, but also the state required to do it. So again, I wanted to paint a full picture just really quickly. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there was some mixed bag, right, in NWA. I just want to remind folks of some other pieces. We also give in K through 5 Acadians testing, which is kind of like the nuts and bolts of reading, the science of reading, critical skills for early readers. We've been doing this for a decade or more. Acadians in a precursor, like in the middle school in Ames Webb, there's another similar program. Dibbles used to be called. But I've seen, since I've been here, this is the first time when we show these kind of tests, assessments of basic reading skills across these grade levels. This is the first time I've seen growth in from fall to spring at every grade level. Okay, so this is a very good picture. Now, obviously, we have one outlier here in first grade, and that's something that the folks at Shady are very concerned about, and are interrogating and investigating about what's going on there and what they could do to kind of help get those kids up. But if you look at, I've always said, I'll look at third grade for example. When you move a group of 70% of students, we have roughly 250 students per grade level. When you go from 70% to 79%, that's roughly 10% gained. That's 25 students, a whole classroom of students that are now reading at grade level and are on track. So just by virtue of what size we are, it's always easy for me to picture like, wow, that's a meaningful metric. A whole classroom of kids are reading at grade level now in a span of 4 or 5 months. So I give kudos to our elementary teachers. Again, some of the NWA stuff is kind of hit and miss, some successes, some kind of setbacks, some things we're examining. But this measure looked very good and as good as I've seen since I've been here. Now I've been here for COVID, so we'll take that with a grain of salt too. And then MSEP, this is even more information. This is going to be more for like afterwards. You want to look us up tomorrow. I did compile both for MSEP, which is our state test in grades K 3 through 8, and then also in 11. There's some science and social studies pieces that get tested there. And then, PSAT, SAT, which is given from 8th grade on until 11th grade. And when I looked, I saw the MDE had given us tier districts. to compare ourselves against. And you can see them down there, schools like Chelsea, Dexter, Gull Lake, Hamilton, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we looked at our M-STEP scores and proficiency rates. On average, we were a +8 points higher of proficiency on reading and writing, and +7 against those peer districts across the board in grades 3 through 8, and then also 11th grade as well. So we perform very well in that summative piece, whether that's M-STEP, whether that's SAT, against our peers, schools that are our size, have our relative affluence, have a similar demographic. So you look across it, those are schools that the state has identified as peer districts to us, and we do very well in comparison. If you want even more breakdown, I've got this. I'm not going to go over today, but you can see that amongst that group, we average in math about 6 out of 17, I think it is, as an average central tendency of proficiency rates. And we're even better, we're third amongst that group of peers, Matawans, the Marquettes, and these very high performing districts around the state. We're third there, so we're doing very well on that, essentially, just to give you the full picture. And then when we compare ourselves to local schools our size, we do even better. We're about 15 percentage points on average better than our local peers in ELA, and around that 16.5 in math. And again, I've compared us to Charlotte, East Lansing, Eaton Rapids, et cetera, et cetera. And if you notice, we're consistently third, but a close third. I mean, we are gaining on East Lansing and Okemos like nobody's, or excuse me, Hazlitt and Okemos like nobody's business. So that is something to celebrate and to strive for. So you see in both math and reading, we're nipping on their heels. So that's kind of a more holistic picture of achievement. I didn't want to just kind of stick with some of that, what is it, good or bad type of thing with NWA, which of course we're working on, which I address in this slide here. Our staffs have continued to work. I was on the phone today with a very concerned principal talking about, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to meet next week with this team, and then we're going to develop an action plan, and we're going to test that plan, getting more materials, sharing materials across grade levels to help out certain grade levels that might not be as performing as well. Teachers are continuing at that student level, trying to get those students communicated the meaning behind NWA or M-STEP and helping them set meaningful goals and reach those goals. And again, the school level leadership teams, grade levels, departments, our own curriculum team that work with me, where I work with them, seek out root causes, hypothesize solutions, and hypothesize solutions and develop action plans and goals. And that's something that we do annually. We do several times a year, and we develop those and kind of keep working the plan. So, any questions?
Other questions for Brian?
I just got a comment. Brian, thank you for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, but I appreciate knowing all of this stuff, or at least, getting a refresher on where things are at. So thank you very much.
If you're a nerd like me, I mean, I'm telling you, go to one of these sheets and kind of like see where the schools are at. Even the students with disabilities rates, graduation rates, for all, local districts. I find that very fascinating, but everybody's not like
That's great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, thanks for the time.
Okay, moving on to item 6, discussion memorial sign nomination. I'm going to let Dr. Sticker give a quick intro, and we'll open it up for more discussion.
And so as I shared with you in the update, Board Policy 7250 kind of outlines Memorial Stadium and how names can get added to the plaque. So some of those requirements are that a person needs to be nominated for their service to the district. They have had to have been deceased for at least 1 year, directly associated with DeWitt Public Schools, and then they come on the board for discussion with the names listed, and you can't act on them tonight, but they can appear on the next agenda where action can be taken. So those nominations that were submitted for our 3 nominees are also in your board packet. I did have a question that was brought up. We're not looking at renaming the stadium, so I know one of the requests was that we rename the stadium with the person's last name. It's Memorial Stadium, but the plaque at Memorial Stadium does list names, and that's what we would be asking for here. So there's already a list, and yes, so whoever.
I think it's like 5 or 6 names on there.
already.
Right.
And
But
so.
we don't have to do only like 1 year. like
You don't have to do
No.
1 year. Actually, you know, I think a couple of them came to Mike earlier, but then he went back to those people who nominated and said, would you feel comfortable holding? So we could bring them all at the same time. The board could do a committee or research, you know, based on the nominations. So you have those 3 names.
How are the nominations solicited? Are they
They're,
solicited in any way?
no, it's people who come over to Mike, and so, and then they're brought to me and bring to the board.
Does everyone know the 3 individuals in the whole thing? Have any questions?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with 2 of them, but one doesn't seem to have information with it that talks about the history. It seems like the one with email stuff.
Okay, so, there are some links, in that one for.
At the bottom,
Yeah,
there's-
and so he was a retired teacher, and so the fire breathing panther and several of the art work, metal work around the district, so, yeah. Yes, yeah, so there's more information in those. Any other questions?
Any further discussion from anybody?
No, but thank you for that explanation.
Okay, move on to item number 7, student report. Curtis.
There's been a lot of listening, so I'll try to get through this as quick as possible. Starting out with more miscellaneous items, we had Winter Fest dance on February the 4th from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. We sold over 400 tickets to the dance. Just for comparison, we sold about 800 homecoming. Overall approval of the dance was high. Students seemed to have just a nice time. On February 3rd, we crowned Winter Fest royalty winners in between the girls and boys basketball games. The winners were Kylie Burtley and Roger Thompson. From February 8th to February 11th, Shirley and a select group of students organized a play called Dog Eat Dog. Students began their class registrations for next year, and they put those class applications into the campus so they can be officially reviewed by the counselors, and they do that over this next week. There will be information. There were informative meetings held on both February 1st and February 8th for students who are interested in taking both dual enrollment and AP classes respectively. This Wednesday, the school day will be finished at 7 a.m. because it is a CLT day for teachers and staff. Finishing off miscellaneous auditions for next year's play, Oklahoma, will be held on February 27th. With sports and athletics, the girls varsity basketball team played against Traverse City Central High School and won 54-37 on February 11th. Their next game is on the 13th at home against Everett High School. Boys varsity basketball team played against Okemos at home and lost 38-42, and that was on the 8th. The next home game is on February 17th against East Lansing High School. The boys swim and dive team on February the 9th was senior night for the boys, and it was at home against Grand Ledge, where DeWitt won a total of 131 points, and Grand Ledge is 55. The next meet is on February 24th against Grand Ledge again for the CAAC prelims. For wrestling on February the 11th, the co-ed wrestling team traveled to Flint to compete in a MHSAA individual districts meet, where 3 of the boys qualified for regionals. Their next meet is on February 18th for the girls regionals, and the location is 2 weeks. The boys ice hockey team on February the 11th played against Portage Northern High School and won 1-0. Their next game is on February the 17th at home against Swan Valley High School. Clubs, the student government is attending its annual MASC-MAHS States Conference from Saturday, February 25th to Monday, February 22nd. At this conference, they will meet with other student governments and class councils from across the state to discuss accomplishments over this current school year. There will be keynote speakers who attend and speak to students, and each school will also be able to vote for a Michigan Student Voice, which is a select group of students who give a speech in front of everyone and discuss experiences in their lives or something that you're interested in. The student with the most votes from the audience receives an award. Quiz Bowl, at their last meet, our JV and varsity Quiz Bowl teams both went 3-0. JV went against Hastings, Hazlitt, and Williamson, and varsity went against Hastings, Hazlitt, and Holt. Finally, for close out, DeWitt Sustainability is a new club that has been proposed. The club will act as a climate committee within the school. The club is sponsored by science and green energy teacher, Mr. Hinks. The club will be focused on the expansion of climate protection and recycling. They plan to attend climate conferences across the state. Their first meeting will be on February 22nd during seminar. For more information, you can contact the advisor, Mr. Hinks, or the club founder, Margaret Heather.
Any questions for this? I just have a quick one that's weird, you may have the answer to. You said that, that winter dance was about half of what you usually get homecoming. Do you think the students on why that is, if people are just not as interested?
I think they see there's homecoming and then there's prom and those are the big dances, and then they see Winterfest as kind of smaller and just don't seem as interested. We don't know exactly why that is because we try to make it about the same for homecoming, so I think people just kind of see it as just a pass along, but overall I think it's around the same.
This is the first one we've had though in a couple of years, so that could also be part of the trend that we haven't added, so we're building back into it.
That makes sense. Sure.
I was just gonna say, I think they exceeded expectations for what they were planning for.
That's great.
So,
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Lucas. Appreciate it. Okay, public communication for items found on the agenda. Lisa?
Nothing else.
Okay. We will close public communication and we will move on to the consent agenda. Recommendation by Superintendent Dr. Sean Skipper that the Board of Education approve, adopt, and accept the following items for immediate implementation and appropriate action is presented. Approval of minutes for the organizational and regular meeting from January 9th, 23, Curriculum Improvement Committee, January 15th, 23, Treasurer's Report and Bills Confirmation for payment for the month of January 23. Treasurer has reviewed the checks, ACH debits, and the purchase card for the month of January 23. Overnight and out-of-state trips for DHS Student Government State Leadership Conference in Grand Rapids, April 25th through 27th, 2023. DHS Business Professionals of America State Competition, Grand Rapids, March 10th through 13th, 2023. DHS Model United Nations Club, Toledo, Ohio, April 22nd to 23rd, 2023. DHS Theater Department in Chicago, April 27th to 30th, 2023. Do I have a motion? Okay, moved and supported. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to action items. First is the 2023-24 DeWitt High School Curriculum Guide. The DeWitt High School Curriculum Guide is in draft form. Each winter, DeWitt High School brings updates, new courses, and any changes for board approval. The recommendation by Superintendent Sean Spicker does Board of Education approve the 23-24 DeWitt High School Curriculum Guide as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion? Yes, sorry.
That's okay, you're fine.
Any-
I just didn't want to speak on Brad's permission. So, I actually have a lot of questions on this, so I apologize in advance, but I can group a bunch of them into one primary question. It seems to be, throughout the entire guide, there's multiple striking of references to AP credit and the ability to get college credit for our AP courses.
So
Do
I
you know
think,
why that is?
and so Matt's here, he can kind of give an overview of some of the, like an overview of the big changes in there and why, and maybe address that.
Just looking at AP specifically. Are you speaking on obtaining the credit with the scores?
So, yep, so it's
Yeah.
that last sentence that's struck on about all of our AP courses that say the score is 3, 2, 3, 4, and then it says they may be eligible for college credit, and then they go on to say that as accepted or potentially accepted by that university or whatnot. So it's that general language at the end of all of our AP courses, and I'm wondering
Yeah,
why we
so
eliminate that.
every college or university can reserve the right to grant credit, and that has changed. Typically, a 3 or higher in most universities and colleges in the state will get you entry-level credit. There are other institutions that it takes a 4 or 5, and I believe now there are some that won't necessarily take them. So my understanding is we're striking any language that implies that if you get this, then this. That might be different based on the college and based on their admission process, which is also evolving as to what's important and what they take into consideration when accepting students. Does that answer your question?
So it's not that they're not going to have that opportunity at the institution's discretion. They can still put that forward for AP credit. I'm just trying to think, why would you take an AP course? Ideally, you take it to get college credit and save money, and at least that's what we parents hope, but
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my dream, but.
Yeah. I think that's what most parents are faced with, the dual enrollment versus the AP question.
Okay.
And I think teachers in the beginning were very concerned that, oh my gosh, this dual enrollment, how could you pass up free tuition when an AP score isn't necessarily guaranteed? And I think what you're seeing, and this is previous district and DeWitt Public Schools, is that the parents and the students still want that rigor. And to be honest with you, the advanced placement courses in Clinton County and especially this district are far above, more rigorous than most of the entry-level courses at LCC and or even in MSU. So I think that if you truly want to be prepared for college, and we have a very high percentage of our kids going on to four-year institutions, then those AP classes is really where it's at. And through the admissions process, and you don't, let's say you don't know what you want to do yet, which is a lot of kids, then dual enrollment might be better for you because you want to get some of those general credits and you want to save dollars. But maybe if you have an idea, you know where you're going to attend, you know that they do accept those credits, then AP is going to prepare you. So it really comes down to that decision. Most universities in the state will accept and you will get credit with a 3 or higher. It is still atypical to require, I'd say, a 4 or 5 within the state of Michigan.
So the language that's being proposed to be stricken, potential for receiving a score leading to college credit based on the accepting university, isn't that still true?
What page are you on again? I'm sorry.
Every time AP is mentioned. This one is specifically on page 20 in connection with AP English Language and Composition. It's the same sentence with every AP course. It says past means receiving a score 3, 4, or 5. Then in parentheses it says potential for receiving a score leading to college credit based on the accepting university. And I'm just wondering why we're striking that last part of potential for receiving.
Are you saying, Matt, it just varies so much at this point that it's tough to, that wasn't describing every kid's situation? Some universities aren't even accepting AP courses anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty rare. I just need to look at them very visually and see the words.
Sure, pick page 20. AP English Language Composition.
27.
Oh,
27.
Oh, mine says 20.
So I'm one of them.
I have a hard copy, would that help?
No, I'm almost there. Bear with me, sorry.
So Angela, one of the things to think about, you mentioned 3, 4, or 5. A 3 could be a waiver at an institution, which doesn't bring credit.
Right.
So that there's a difference there. So I do think you have to be careful with the type of information that we put forward because it can be confusing for students and for parents. We don't get the situation assuming that they have earned credit because we say a 3, but a 3 won't necessarily earn you credit.
And I would support striking all of that about the scores, but I'm asking about the last sentence that says potential for receiving a score leading to college credit based on the accepting university.
And I think it's that statement was causing confusion. That there was an assumption that if they got a 3, 4, or 5, they would receive credit.
But if
even though
you
it
strike
says
the
potential.
score and told them there is potential for receiving a score that could lead to college credit, or that could be accepted based on the university. I mean, I guess I don't want if you strike that whole thing and you're taking an AP course, there's no mention whatsoever in the AP course that there's any potential for college credit. That's right, I mean,
Or on the flip side, people might assume that they get credit no matter what, or they're not,
I think that's been the issue is people, they take it thinking they'll get the credit and.
Well, it also varies on subject, not just even within an institution. So like MSU, for example, may allow a 3 to give you credit for English, but it might take a 4 for physics, or whatever. It's like that varies in institution, not only in institution, but also subject.
so if we strike all of this and just stay out of it, which is what's proposed, then is the message to students who take AP courses, you're gonna have to check with any institution or college that you go to, and that's okay, if that's it, that you need to check with the requisite college or institution to determine whether you need anything with this course.
Yeah, I
That's
see.
fine.
That's
all I want.
literally what we
That's
preach
all I
our
wanna
AP
know.
courses.
Go scope
So we
that
say,
out.
we take them directly to the university they're going in, and they check out how much credits they'll get, if we even suggest they take it. So the comment that's what people do, like in AP chemistry, probably only 20%, maybe 30, take the AP test.
Okay.
We don't recommend a whole bunch do it, because if you're going pre-med, we want you to get the 4 point in college to boost your GPA for med school.
And that's why I shook my head, not everybody wants that, because we had our kids take AP classes, but only to help them get higher GPA in actual college, not to test out of the classes.
So you're saying that only 20 to 30% of people in chemistry, for example, take the test from the people who take the course?
My own daughter didn't take the test.
Interesting.
I experienced that with Alex as well. He took the AP course, but
Yes.
then had to pay a penalty because he didn't take the test.
Angelina, I think the explanation for AP courses is higher up in the course information on page 5. And then I think the past, and again, this is probably a question to the teachers and administrators, you don't have to get a 3, 4, or 5 to actually pass the class, right? Right. I mean, you don't have to take the test at all. So
That's helpful. That's
why that's confusing, is because I read that as, in order to pass the class, you need to get a 3, 4, or 5, which is not on the test, which is
And then you have to take it.
correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that as we were going through and striking all of this language in our AP courses, that there wasn't some big change in DeWitt's curriculum, that all of a sudden the AP courses we're teaching here are not eligible.
I think
for
it's just to
credit
clear up,
colleges.
to just kind of clear up.
For some, that may be true though, depending on your institution. Like, if you take a specific topic for AP, that might not be accepted by institution
Right.
A, but it might by institution B.
Yeah, understood. Okay, go to my next issue, because that clears up a lot of them. Are we eliminating AP as an independent study? It looks like that's completely stricken. Did anyone use that as an independent study? I mean, it looked like-
We struck the portion that says required courses cannot be taken as independent study to allow for really the discretion for any course to be taken as independent study. Even courses not mentioned in everything else.
So we struck the sentence that says required courses cannot be taken as independent study. So now we will let required courses be independent study.
Mostly because we all.
Okay.
The practice.
Yeah, and this is, you won't normally see this. I think that, I mean, Mr. Bias could speak, the last time we really dove into the curriculum guide and changed prereqs. And
Oh, yeah.
Has it been a while?
It's been a while.
Yeah. So
A
this was
long
really
time.
trying to tackle a good
There's a lot of
portion.
it.
Yeah.
And it's twofold too, because it was such an old document that it needed to be changed over to a Google document, so it could be collaborated on. So there are a lot of formatting updates, there's some rearranging updates, and then each individual course,
I
some
skipped all
updates.
the formatting and rearranging. My questions are mostly substantive. So the striking under advanced placement classes, it says on occasion, students may be able to take AP courses as an independent study, and this option should be discussed with student services. So that's taken out. And so I read that to mean you can't take an AP course as an independent study.
No, I think if you go to independent study on page 6, I believe, at the bottom it's there.
Yep.
It should be in there that, the language should allow for I think it says where they can't take the AP courses, right?
Looks like all courses open up, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense. Okay.
Now, that would be rare, and it'd have to be a special.
Right.
I mean, every
Stuff.
situation is independent studies.
My question is, I'm sorry, Angelina, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope, you're good.
You good?
I'm not good overall. I still have a lot more questions, but you can go ahead if you want to go now.
Just the 31 credits for class of 2025 and beyond, why did that change?
So we were at 31 credits prior to COVID, and the board must have approved a reduction in credit.
I think I did ask the question, why we voted it, now that I think about it.
So that was my understanding. So with, it would be the current freshman class, it's 25, correct? Would be back to the 31 credits that were standard prior to on the block schedule.
So we would have reduced it to 30 credits for the graduating class of
I
2024.
think it had something to do with seminar. Yeah.
Seminar wasn't offered at certain times, so
During COVID, we removed seminar.
students couldn't garner those credits.
And so we couldn't have that as one of our credit requirements because it literally ceased to
Wasn't
exist.
there. It was gone.
And now it's back again. So.
Getting back on. All right, so on page 6, we talk about how scheduling adjustments, there's a change in the word must in May on when we'll make scheduling adjustments. And so it says, under scheduling adjustments, it says changes must be made for academic graduation requirements. Now it says may be made for academic graduation requirements. I just want to make sure that if somebody needs something for graduation,
Oh, absolutely.
okay, we're not just saying, hey, we might do it. Before I
Yeah,
just say we must
that
do it.
one, to be honest with you, I'm not sure why it would go from,
That seems odd, to
Yeah.
go from must to may.
or just say, yeah, well,
I'll just leave from must to home.
shall.
Must, shall. That's weird. All right. Oh, page 7.
Mhm.
We changed the testing out, so it says students must score, it used to say 78% or higher to demonstrate proficiency. Now it's to 85%.
Mhm. So the state sets the minimum, so the statute is, that is the minimum. We feel that in order to take a comprehensive exam to get credit for a course at DeWitt High School, you need to get 85 or better. So we're kind of raised the bar there from the state minimum to 85% to test out of the course. The other change there is that the grade that the student earns on said exam would be the grade that's placed on the transcript.
So you want to raise it to 85% to test out. And then the statute, you said sets the minimum 78%?
I don't even know if it gives a percentage. I believe it says C plus.
We'll get more information on what statute that is. Doesn't have to be right now, I just need later.
I mean, I just think that it's the rigor of if the student's going to test out, we want them to get a B, not a C plus. And
On page 8, it talks about the Michigan Virtual University. We've changed that from only for 10th and 12th graders. Is that based on what Michigan Virtual University allows, or is there a reason we're taking our 9th graders?
No, this is, so those are the grades in which we recommend. If a student is in a different situation, has a personal curriculum, or has something, I guess, that would be atypical, then of course, I believe with 21F, that could be a possibility for any student 612.
Do we know why we're changing it to 10 and 12 though?
Well, I think the grade levels are, the highly recommended or the anticipated grade level in which they would take it, in that case. Not necessarily courses that are taught by our teachers, But we would not actively encourage a freshman coming in to take a Michigan virtual course for several different reasons. But there are situations that do. I think one of the popular ones is being able to offer American Sign Language through Michigan Virtual as a world language course.
Are students still required to take one online course in order to graduate?
They need to have an online experience.
Page 9, under high school advantage,
Yes.
there's a lot of striking there on teaching by our faculty and courses are transferable. Is that to align back with that whole, it may not transfer based on the college or university?
That's part of it. The other part is our teachers don't teach the high school advantage courses.
Okay. Did they teach it before?
Not to my knowledge. That's usually Lansing Community College adjunct professors. And then it is dual enrollment. And to be clear, the high school advantage is because we have so many kids enrolling that if we have 15, which I believe we have more, 15 is actually a cost savings going through that. So if I dual enroll a la carte at LCC, certain tuition costs. But if I have 15 kids that want to take the intro to social, intro to psych, it saves the district money to have them be in the same class through high school advantage.
Page 17, we're eliminating Java. Is there any other computer coding classes that will be added to supplement that, or why are we getting rid of Java?
We're temporarily changing that because we have a new teacher. We do some programming, Python specifically, but I want to get her up to speed before we put something official back in the course catalog.
This one's real sad. We're eliminating the happiness and power of positivity.
Yeah, we don't like it. Not a big fan.
Wow, all right.
No.
No happy.
No. You know, part of me wants to say like, well, every class is happy. We have some anticipated personnel changes. Again, I say anticipated. But we wanted to look at, we added some new 9-week electives, and I think that we can achieve some of those core themes in a different style of those 9-week electives.
All right.
I've taken that class, you can take it, I don't know if you can still do it for free, but during the pandemic, you can take it for free.
Oh, yeah.
So so page 23, there's an elimination of the education career year 1 and education career year 2 teaching field experience. I guess I just have a little bit of concern as we face a teacher shortage that we're eliminating track that goes for teachers.
So that is attached to a state initiative that we need certification for. And the Ms. Blake actually who presented was going to be our certified teacher. I'm not sure if she ever reached that point, but I know currently she doesn't possess that. That's something that she and I talked about because she teaches a full load. And if we're ever able to make an additional hire there, or if sections of her schedule can get freed up and she regains that certification, then we would absolutely be bringing that back.
Look at page 30 and 31, advanced lead training. They used to have a leadership development component in it. Are we picking that up somewhere else, or is the reason why we're striking the components that deal with leadership?
I believe the leadership is still in there in a different spot. Is that accurate? I hope so. PE underwent a whole overhaul. And I can speak to you more on that, but
I just wondered if we were going with the theory that most of these courses in physical education integrate leadership, development, dedication, resilience, and all of those skills that we hope our students learn.
yeah, so that one was, I thought, that was one I put a lot of thought into because not only do I like the title of the other one more, what we're trying to do is be very targeted We noticed a lot of students, as far as engaging in PE, there's a section that do, and there's a section that don't want any part of it, which is one of the reasons that, and I don't know if it's part of this, but looking at marching band, 4 years of marching band covering the PE credit, I'm for that, and I'm saying yes. I don't, and that was a question that recently came up, and there's some proposed other changes with our band program, good changes that I need to seek more input on before I bring that forward, but I am in support of that. And then I know we're working on time. The PE, so looking at it as, you know, you have certain kids who become very interested in that lifelong fitness. You have groups of kids who want to go to the next level, want to be very specific in their training. We are specialized now in what these kids are competing in athletically, but also people who are very competitive, people who love to participate in these games. So what are we wanted to be more targeted and specific in what you're going to be doing in these courses. So that instead of just one course in PE that is the foundation and you get the credit for, now as an incoming freshman, you can take 2 or 3 different courses that will give you that foundational credit. And then as you grow and mature by your junior year or even before, you can be branching off into that. I really want to go into some specific specialized advanced weight training, or I want to go more into my lifelong fitness, nutrition. All those things are being talked at, but we're trying to meet and you know, it's very uncomfortable when you're in a PE class and you're at very different levels of competition as a 15 to 18-year-old.
So that's a switch from eliminating co-ed fun and fitness and then going to lifetime sports and fitness?
And the statute is at least a C+, so that's just us setting the bar higher. A lot of it has to do with we want our students to take our classes with their amazing teachers, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
Any other questions? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next, it is the recommendation by Superintendent Dr. Sean Spicker that the Board of Education adopt the DeWitt Public Schools sex education curriculum as presented earlier this evening. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Okay, with supported, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That is it for action items. On to public communications for items not found on the agenda. Lisa?
Parker Ever?
So my name is Parker Conrad. I'm a teacher at the high school. I'm a part of the chamber choir and the musical department, as well as an avid AP course taker. I know we just had some previous discussion about AP and marching band and stuff like that. So I wanted to kind of revisit that and propose to you that these courses, the chamber choir and the marching band, while chamber choir is a whole year course, marching band is only a 9-week course, they both take up a massive chunk of time. And the marching band starts all the way in May of the previous year and goes till November, competing in competitions and rehearsals throughout that time, as well as participating in a 3-week-long band camp period, as well as chamber taking up the whole year from August to May, as well as their performances, as well as their gigs and stuff like that, as well as the rigor that it takes outside of class to rehearse on this stuff. A lot of the students in the chamber choir are a part of other organizations such as the musical or the cabaret, which we do host coming up here in the next month. I wanted to propose a change that remove these 2 courses, which are advanced in rigor, to allow for an honors level course, which would apply a GPA boost for these performance arts courses for students who are being hindered by not being able to take the AP courses such as AP Physics, AP Government, AP US History, and AP Calculus, which are all offered during those set times that we have for chamber and marching band, that those students that want to take those courses can't and are being hindered by that, by our school's online class policy that we use through FBU or dual enrollment. I'm fortunate enough to be taking enough sections of dual enrollment right now to help with my college transcript. However, the AP is starting to elude me more as the chamber is taking up more time, so I just wanted to bring a proposal that we move these higher rigor courses that a lot of time out of school to some sort of honors course. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question on that, I didn't want to get into. Do you have to audition for both of those, or does Chamber Choir?
Chamber Choir goes through an audition process, and the marching band doesn't do as much of an audition process, but you have to attend the band camp, which is a week long, but there's other preliminary things as well as things after that.
The marching band does do a full audition process. They have to record their auditions, and they get set pieces, and then they're established by the parts. They usually try and find a home for everybody, but they do.
But there's potential for students to be cut or not make it.
I mean, if you only have 6 snares, you're going to get 6 people on snare, and if you will play with that, then.
And we've had people not do band because they couldn't do the instrument.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, appreciate it.
Will Thompson.
Thank you. I didn't realize there was a signed nomination for Craig Kaler. I'd just like to say that I wholeheartedly support that. The one thing, I don't know the rules, but I would ask if there's an option that a boardroom or some other place could be dedicated. It might be more meaningful than putting the name on 6 or 7 of those. Next, I'd like to talk for a little bit about the issues going on at East Lansing schools. Although none of us have all the details and stories, the reports are very concerning. Both students and teachers talking about regular fights in the halls, concerns over their safety, lockdowns. Someone had a gun in the parking lot the other day. Certainly sounds like there's a complete breakdown in the basic safety for both students and teachers, and it should concern us all. I would ask the super and the board to please follow what's going on and make sure we don't go down the same path. I've always said it's always better to learn from other people's mistakes than make them yourself. Second, I believe that we should have a policy or practice to not play any sports at their school until we have confidence that our students and parents can be safe. We indeed saw violence break out at our last football game at East Lansing, allowing our parents and students to go again knowing that there is a safety question should not be acceptable. I know the safety of our students, faculty, and parents is your number one priority, and I appreciate the consideration.
That's it?
Sorry, I have one.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I didn't want to get out.
Thank you. Member Warner.
So just to follow up with Will, Lucas, you did a really nice job with your presentation. You should be very proud of yourself. So yeah, where there is no discipline, there will be chaos. And so following up with the East Lansing situation, the reason that I started coming to the board meetings a couple of years ago, first was when I heard that you're looking for a new superintendent. That caused concern because that will lead to change. Also, the observation of issues going on in schools around our district. Things, rumors, and concerns that the implementation and theories of DEI. A few weeks ago, we heard about East Lansing. The public was made aware of there was massive violence going on. I've been hearing about it actually for years over in East Lansing. I believe that East Lansing students are all victims of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the theories and the policies that are being implemented. Last fall, DeWitt students fell victim to the careless policies during the football game at East Lansing, where students were physically assaulted and by East Lansing students. I would like to propose, for the safety of our students, that DeWitt not participate in sporting events where their schools are dealing with violence. I would also like to ask that you look into the DEI theories and policies that might be implemented and how they could negatively affect our district. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
So just an update on our strategic plan and how we're doing in our goal areas. For first, communication and engagement, hopefully you received your February More to Your Door and the Foundation of Pride Awards were highlighted there. We'll also be featured in the Chamber magazine if you received that through the mailings. We've had several safety updates that have gone out, as well as our family, staff, and perception surveys. And last but not least, the Pride, the Points of Pride was also sent out for February. As far as academic programs, the middle school and high school mentoringship has been running and has been highly successful. And we are also doing our MAP, which is the NWA Accelerated Pilot for grades 2 through 8 to help with some of our more gifted or students who are performing really well on that assessment. As far as safety and operations, we have been working on our emergency alert system and notification, also our drills and the language that we've been using with Run, Hide, Fight and how we're varying those drills within the different buildings. Cyber safety training has also commenced for staff with some modules to help us make sure that we're keeping our systems secure. And then all of cabinet, we're also trained last month in Narcan. So, and we were through that, we were able to get supplies for each of our buildings throughout the district. For learning environment, the peer mentoring, as mentioned earlier, is going very well. The DeWitt Community Partnership hosted a cultural panel, which was well attended and continues to get views because it was recorded and we're able to track that. The zones of regulations and PBIS, or positive behavioral intervention supports, as well as our new screening tool, which is called SAVERS. So those are some things that are helping, making sure that we're keeping that positive learning environment and culture. As far as personnel, we have started our EduStaff para subbing, and so to see if we're actually get more para pros. And then also an orientation for our instructional assistants to kind of help those para-pros kind of understand the job and different disabilities and how to work with those students. So events coming up, there is a community conversation at CC RISA on March 1st on school safety as well as mental health. And then I have sent out, I think I shared with you, an invite to our legislators, inviting them to celebrate March's Reading Month, and we have had 3 different legislators take us up on the offer to come out and meet with students. So that's exciting.
Along those lines, is there an opportunity for us to do that as well? Like, we used to do this pre-COVID. Occasionally, board members would come in and go to various classes.
Oh, absolutely.
And participate in that. So I don't know.
So those March 9th and 10th are kind of dates that the principals are kind of keeping on their radar as far as there would be some guests. So if you're interested and one of those days works for you, let me know and we'll get you scheduled. If you can let me know what grade level you prefer to do as well.
Yeah, for those who haven't done it before, we used to be able to go do that as a group and kind of pick a day for us to go into various various classes.
But as elected officials, we'd love to have you.
They're cap, we're not like we're in the high school, right?
Well, the legislators are invited to have lunch at the high school and answer questions that maybe our students may have, or, yeah. So the planning is still being done, but if you are interested, let me know and I'll get you scheduled.
Any questions for that speaker?
First off, comment. I just want to say, in relation to some of the stuff that's happening in other districts, thank you for informing us. Thank you for working with local area law enforcement. Thank you for reaching out, making sure that our parents understood and we're dealing with the narrative that was being passed in the River Mill, so that we are in a good place in terms of knowledge and for having a plan that if we got into a situation that we would feel comfortable reporting out to the children, faculty and staff be safe. So thank you for that.
That's what I was going to say.
That's what I was going to say too.
All
So
right. Thank you.
we're good.
Anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Support. All those in favor? Aye. Great, we're adjourned.